Hugh Hewitt in Studio West on the Salem News Channel, the Salem Radio Network, and affiliates across the United States. Whether you're listening in your car, whether you're at home watching SNC, whatever you're doing, you're happy. You're happy because the market's happy. And the market's been unhappy for a week, and now the market's happy. And I'll explain this in detail. I originally said, wait 6 months before you judge whatever it is Donald Trump is up to. Turns out he had to wait 6 days. And Scott Bessant went out. First, the president posted the truth, got picked up on X immediately saying, okay, 90-day pause. We're going to do all these deals. And the world divided into pro-U.S. and pro-China people, which is what I was hoping for from the beginning, that we get serious about the fact we're in Cold War 2.0. China's not our friend. China is our enemy. And they've cheated, they've lied, they've stolen. And we ought not to buy stuff from them. And we ought to discourage other people buying things from them. And we ought to make sure people know that they are predators in the marketplace, not traders. I think we're going to end up there. But it's the final score, not the score at the end of the first quarter that matters. Like the Cavaliers won last night. By the way, they won the first seed in the Eastern Division as well. And 3 days earlier, people were panicked because they lost to the Sacramento Kings in Cleveland. And that's just sports. And this is just markets. But let me let you hear for yourself what Treasury Secretary Scott Bessant said on the White House lawn today that made the market so happy. I'll do the market update after this, cut number 12.
As I said, we've given 90 days, and the only certainty we can provide is that the U.S. is going to negotiate in good faith, and we assume that our allies will too. And in terms of certainty, we will see what China does, but what I am certain of is that what China is doing will affect their economy much more than it will ours, because they have an export-driven, flood the world with cheap export models, and the rest of the world now understands, because when we put up our tariff wall, those exports were already flowing to the rest of the G7 and to the global south.
And you think
Mr. Secretary, how much of this decision was driven by the bond market cratering overnight? What is happening with bonds? Is China selling their bonds?
I have nothing that says that, and we actually had quite a good 10-year auction today, and all this was, again, this was driven by the president's strategy. He and I had a long talk on Sunday, and this was his strategy all along, and that, you might even say that he goaded China into a bad position. They responded. They have shown themselves to the world to be the bad actors. And we are willing to cooperate with our allies and with our trading partners who did not retaliate. It wasn't a hard message. Don't retaliate. Things will turn out well.
It wasn't a hard message, but some people didn't get it. Cut number 13, more of Treasury.
We started with a 90-day pause, and we will see if more countries turn up, what will happen. But we have a meeting with Vietnam today, and we have one of the largest trade deficits with them. So I'm hoping it will move in a good direction. I was at the Japanese ambassador's house last night for the Cherry Blossom Festival, which was quite festive, and he and I had a good chat. They are going to send a deal team over. So we'll see. These are complicated negotiations. These are imbalances that have taken decades to create. But I think having seen the maximum level that Donald Trump is willing to go to, President Trump has created this negotiating leverage.
Cut number 14, more Secretary Bessant.
It signals that President Trump cares about trade and that we want to negotiate in good faith. And as I said, each one of these is going to be a separate, bespoke negotiation. So we are confident that having seen the other side of where this could go, and it was like I said last week, the market didn't understand. Those were maximum levels. The countries can think about those levels as they come to us to bring down their tariffs, their non-tariff trade barriers. We're going to discuss currency manipulation, subsidy of labor and industry.
And let's do one more, cut number 15.
And we saw the successful negotiating strategy that President Trump implemented a week ago today. it has brought more than 75 countries forward to negotiate. It took great courage for him to stay the course until this moment. And what we have ended up with here, as I told everyone a week ago, they're in this very spot, do not retaliate and you will be rewarded. So every country in the world who wants to come and negotiate, we are willing to hear you. We're going to go down to a 10% baseline tariff for them, and China will be raised to 125 due to their insistence on escalation.
You know, let's add one more, since he brought up China specifically, cut number 16.
As you see it now, this trade war is China versus the rest of the world.
Well, I'm not calling it a trade war, but I'm saying that China has escalated, and President Trump responded very courageously to that.
Now, let me give you a market update after this and the president's post. Market update is brought to you by AmericanFederal.com every day. And every day I tell you the same thing. They buy and sell gold. They do it transparently. They do it quickly. You can call them at 1-800-221-7694. Or you can visit AmericanFederal.com at this hour. And we are a good 45 minutes away from the market closing, and it could either close higher into the profits or close lower with profit taking. I don't trade. I'm not a trader. I'm an investor. And I think I told the only advice I ever give people is don't sell in a panic. And never sell in a panic. Well, the Dow is up 6.8% right now. The S&P is up 7.9% right now. The NASDAQ is up just about 10% right now. And gold is up to $3,080. You remember it was at $2,090 yesterday. And so it's up more than 3%, $3,080. Some people bought on the dip. Some people didn't. I don't do that ever. I don't try and time the market because I'm a dummy and I'm not a professional trader. I don't spend 24/7, 365 staring at a computer with little green numbers. That's not what I do. That's what the professionals do. I do news, policy, politics, and law. But I do buy gold every year. At the same time, I buy it from Nick Rovich and AmericanFederal.com because I trust them. I know them. I've sat down with Nick. Very easy, very transparent, exactly what I want. He doesn't upsell me, he doesn't downsell me. He says, what do you want? We do it. Here's the price. Here's the commission. Boom, boom, boom. And you can do the same thing. 800-221-7694. Now, I never sell gold. Never sell. I've given it away before as a part of a fundraising campaign for a church. Scooped out to the safety deposit box, scooped out some of the Krugerrands were in there and gave it to the church, and they go and sell it immediately, and it's taxable deduction worth whatever they sell it for. I want you to know it's not a trading thing. You shouldn't be trading gold. You can trade gold futures if you want. You can buy gold stocks if you want. But that's really speculation, and speculation doesn't make you money over the long term. Dollar cost averaging does, which means you buy the same amount in dollars of something, whether it's the whole market, whether it's a mutual fund, whether it's gold, whether it's silver, the same time. But sometimes you got to liquidate assets. If you need assets, you got to liquidate. You can do that in a couple of ways. You can borrow against your house, or you can sell the gold that you've been buying on a regular basis for 25 years, and that's always pretty fungible. And there'll be a commission deducted. The good news is over the past 100 years, gold more than kept pace with inflation. AmericanFederal.com is where you go to do that. Time for my relief factor. I did not go up the implacable hill today. I was kind of glued to the news, combined with Mary Catherine Ham is on. I had to listen to Getting Hammered, and I have many excuses. I really don't have any excuses. I should have gone up the implacable hill, and I didn't because I was tired. I was out late last night with a veteran of the Johnson, Nixon, and Ford administration. We were talking about the International Economic Emergency Act and my skepticism about whether it would hold up. Doesn't have to now. Doing with the pause, that probably not ripe. It is not ripe, so it should not proceed. But it's ripe. It's time to take relief factor. And if you're watching on the Salem News Channel, I just did. It's that easy. They're that easy to swallow. 4 pills, Icarian, curcumin, resveratrol, omega. You can hear it on the radio. It takes a sip of water. They make these supplements so well coated, so the right size, and it's Icarian, curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. Together, they help your body's natural anti-inflammatory system make the minor aches and pains of life go away. And who doesn't want that? Call 1-800, the number 4 in the word relief, 1-800-4-RELIEF, or go to their website for the starter pack at $19.95, relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. Next up, Smug, Comfortably Smug from the Ruthless podcast on today's events. Hugh Hewitt in Studio West for the Salem News Channel, Salem Radio Network, affiliates across the entire United States. All of them waiting eagerly for Hack Madness to conclude and wrap up tomorrow. Comfortably Smug joins us from the Ruthless podcast. Smug, welcome. I know there's quite a market going on. Any tips? I got all my money on Margaret Brennan winning. But I had Houston winning too. So I'm not the best person. When do we find out? When does the episode drop?
Well, first off, thanks so much for having me, Hugh. And we should know any minute now, actually. So the voting is over. I think in the next hour. We should know soon enough. And betting on Margaret Brennan to take this whole thing down is not a bad bet. I don't need to tell you the run that she's been on, whether it was the way she moderated that debate that Vice President had, or the way that she's been week after week handling interviews, whether it was with Secretary Rubio, trying to explain to him, or the follow-up interview that she had with Vice President Vance of trying to be like, well, isn't it okay if these violent migrants take a couple buildings? So she's had a record kind of run to get to where she is right now. And I think, it's looking like she's headed towards that win, and it's a well-earned win as Hack of the Year.
I'm always looking ahead, Smug, to next year. So I'm going to keep count of the number of times that the vice president explodes a journalist. And then I'm just going to add that journalist that gets exploded the most times by the vice president is going to be my number one ranking that I'm going to suggest to you. Let's move on to the last episode of the Ruthless podcast. Our favorite cabinet member and yours, Secretary of the Interior, Doug Burgum, ended by saying, "Go north, young man," and he brought in the idea of bringing back the woolly mammoth. So we discussed this last night at dinner about whether we're comfortable with the woolly mammoth coming back, and it was a 4-0 vote no. However, the folks at the Ruthless podcast seemed all into this. Did you not see Jurassic Park growing up?
Well, here's the thing is I think we could actually do it, though. We've learned the lessons from seeing Jurassic Park. Raptors aren't a great idea, but the woolly mammoth, they're not going to be opening doors. They're not jumping out of cages. It's as this, secretary explained, they're essentially just like, fuzzy elephants, right? So I think that's saying that you don't want the woolly mammoth. You're avoiding the possible upside of imagine hunting these things. There's large tracts of land in Texas that would be perfect for having just you hire a guide and you go on a woolly mammoth hunt. It'd be incredible. I'd be the first person to sign up for that.
There are unexplored side effects to this, including the scale of the weapon you'd have to carry. Have you ever seen an elephant gun, Smug?
It'd have to be a mammoth gun now. I mean, an elephant gun might not even cut it.
That's a 2-person operation there. You might need a bazooka. Smug, let's talk about the market today. Obviously, Secretary Bessant turned everything around with one announcement. I would like to think that this was all planned. I don't think it was all planned. I think it's a reaction to circumstances, but it comes down where I'd love to finish. I don't care how the Cavaliers win the NBA title, if they win the NBA title. So if Trump ends up dividing the world into us versus China, I'm all for it. What are your thoughts? You're actually a financial guy.
Yeah, so I mean, I completely agree with you on that. When I was, we've had a lot of time over the past couple of weeks to think about international trade, the way America's economy has shifted fundamentally, how manufacturing jobs have gone overseas. And to me, it seems like it all boils down to all those points of how America has lost out comes down to China's role in this, whether it's them joining the WTO, which to me seems as like the most significant part of the puzzle here in trying to solve for it. So when there were all these tariffs announced for many, many countries, many of whom are partners of the United States, whether it was, with Israel or countries that we have not had an antagonistic relationship with whatsoever. The action that was just taken today, which essentially isolates China, is the right solution. And I'm with you. I don't know if this was planned or not, but I like the end stage of where we are now highlighting completely that the issue here is China, because there was a danger for a while there. If we're enacting if we're enacting tariffs on every other country, it's almost like enacting sanctions on the United States and their citizens alone. And the lesson in that situation would be for other countries of the world to trade with each other. But what has now become, evident is that China is at the center of this policy. China is the target of this policy, and the market's very positive reaction, I think, says how much anxiety we had of a system where essentially it made the U.S. an enemy of every other country.
I love the end point, if it's the end point. Now, before I go on to the tax bill and the budget bill, Smug, I do want to talk about the Youngstown hate over at the Ruthless podcast. Now, you guys just randomly launched into 4 or 5 body checks on Youngstown, which is adjacent to Warren. It's the Youngstown Warren era. It's the Steel Valley, or the old Steel Valley, or what was the Steel Valley. And, of course, you got Ashbrook there. He's a Cincinnati kid. He hates Youngstown, Warren, because we dominate in state football. Where did the Youngstown hatred come from? You all dove in. You all piled onto Youngstown.
So I just saw it as a blanket, kind of like a cheap shot to take at Ohio, because Ashbrook, day in, day out, it could be any subject. He'll find a way to bring Ohio up and say how Ohio is the greatest. If I remember correctly, my context in describing it is that Ohio is yet again poised to have, a kind of manufacturing renaissance. You have companies like Anduril, which just announced that they're opening this manufacturing plant in Ohio, and that the manufacturing jobs are not, the stereotypical, thought of, it's going to be like a industrial revolution, turn of the century kind of a factory job. But with robotics and automation, these are going to be extremely well-paying jobs.
Well, they're going to be up in the Northeast near the water, because we got the water. Cincinnati's not really part of Ohio, so you tell Ashbrook that. Now, also, Burgum told you that all of the AI ought to locate in North Dakota and Montana. And I had Governor Gianforte on yesterday, and we talked about bobcats versus bison, pronounced correctly.
Yeah.
However, you didn't press him on what stranded natural gas meant. He just threw that out. Do you know what stranded natural gas means? Like, are they in a hotel holed up with Bonnie and Clyde?
That's a great question. And I would love to also have Governor Gianforte on our show. You always book the best guests.
Well, it's a lot easier to do radio and television from your hotel room or from any screen than getting to your elaborate security measures. It's like getting into the Ruthless podcast is harder than getting into the EOB. Not quite the White House level. So Smug, I'm going to close with this. When you get around to the yes or no bill on the vote on the budget, are you a bull or a bear on whether the House GOP will shoot itself in the head over the weekend?
I don't think the House GOP is going to shoot itself in the head. I think over the past few months we've seen Speaker Johnson just do an excellent job of being able to rally that team together and pull off miracles when they need to be done. I wouldn't count out the House GOP. I think Speaker Johnson's got this in hand.
From your lips to the House GOP Freedom Caucus ears, no grandstanding. Let's get it done. Smug, thank you. I look forward to the Ruthless Podcast Thursday edition so I can find out who won Hack Madness. My money is on Margaret Brennan. We will see. Donald Trump just concluded a White House drop-by, as is his wont. Surrounded by NASCAR figures, the president spoke about the pause on the tariffs, cut number 17.
Well, I thought that people were jumping a little bit out of line. They were getting yippy, They were getting a little bit yippy, a little bit afraid, unlike these champions, because we have a big job to do. No other president would have done what I did. No other president. I know the presidents. They wouldn't have done it. And it had to be done. What was happening to us on trade, not only with, if you look at it, not only with China, but China was by far the biggest abuser in history, and others also, but somebody had to do it. They had to stop because it was not sustainable. Last year, China made $1 trillion off trade with the United States. That's not right. And now I've reversed it. It's for a short period of time, but we made $2 billion. We're making now $2 billion a day And somebody had to do it. Roger actually said it. Charles Schwab was here a little while ago, one of the great financial people, and he said he's been waiting for 40 years for somebody to do what I did over the last month. And if you didn't do it, you wouldn't have a country. It wouldn't be sustainable. So I'm honored to have done it. And, look, nothing's over yet, but we have a tremendous amount of spirit from other countries, including China. China wants to make a deal. They just don't know how quite to go about it. It's one of those things they don't know how quite. They're proud people. And President Xi's a proud man. I know him very well. And they don't know quite how to go about it, but they'll figure it out. They're in the process of figuring it out, but they want to make a deal. And we have many other countries, as you know, many more than 75. And they all want to come, and they want to come here, or they'll go to Commerce, or they'll go to Treasury. We have our great senators here and congressmen. They'll call John, they'll do somebody, they'll go through somebody, but they're all calling, how do we do this? They all want to make a deal. Somebody had to do what we did, and I did a 90-day pause for the people that didn't retaliate, because I told them if you retaliate, we're going to double it. And that's what I did with China, because they did retaliate. So we'll see how it all works out. I think it's going to work out amazing. I think that our country is going to be at the end of a year or shorter, but I think we're going to have something that nobody would have dreamt possible. A man like Roger Penske, I don't want to get him in trouble with China, so I won't, but he would know that someday you have to cut the bow.
So I want you to know, yippee is a highly technical term. Yippee refers to the way Dwayne putts, yips, the way Steve Sack would throw to first base. You get the yips, and as I told you, don't sell into a panic. Don't ever sell into a panic. President kept going, cut number 18.
First of all, I know him. He's a good man, and I appreciate his comments. Yeah, a deal could be made with every one of them. A deal's going to be made with China. A deal's going to be made with every one of them. And there'll be fair deals. I just want fair. There will be fair deals for everybody. But they weren't fair to the United States. They were sucking us dry, and you can't do that. We have
Sucking us dry.
36
this was about China, always about China. And I'm glad we have clarity on China. And I'm glad he speaks softly about General Secretary Xi, the chairman of the Chinese Communist Party, who was a Leninist through and through with worldwide tyrannical ambitions. But presidents can't say that. Hosts can say that. Commentators can say that. The president can't say that. He has to deal with him the way that FDR had to deal with Stalin and Nixon had to deal with Brezhnev and Mao. You got to deal with the people that are dominating parts of the world. So you don't say horrible things about them, but you take their measure. You know their measure. One more cut from the president in the White House, cut number 22.
No, I think you have to have, it's not a question of that. You have to have flexibility. I could say, here's a wall, and I'm going to go through that wall. I'm going to go through it no matter what. And keep going, and you can't go through the wall. Sometimes you have to be able to go under the wall, around the wall, or over the wall. These guys know that better than anybody, right? You got to go around them sometimes. You're not going to go through them. So I consider, I think in financial markets, because they change. Look how much it changed today. We went from, pretty moderate today, but over the last few days it looked pretty glum, to, I guess they say it was the biggest day in financial history. That's a pretty big change. And I think the word would be flexible. You have to be flexible. Like he's asking the question about some companies. Some companies, through no fault of their own, they happen to be in an industry that is more affected by these things than others. You have to be able to show a little flexibility.
Show a little flexibility. Don't get the yips, and stay tuned to the Hugh Hewitt Show, whether you're listening in your car on your drive home, on one of my affiliates, you're watching on the Salem News Channel. Stay flexible. Mary Catherine Ham's very flexible, though. She said on the Getting Hammered podcast earlier today, she's sore. She had a long train ride. She was in the M&M store, and that's a bad place to be. I think it's a bad place to be. We'll talk with her. Mary Catherine Ham is the host of the Getting Hammered podcast, and apparently she is open to collect your curio cabinet. Mary Catherine, I'm afraid there are going to be curio cabinets left on your lawn after this new edition of Getting Hammered. I'm wondering, will you take my 1,500 books that my kids don't want? Uh-oh, you're muted. Someone's
I would
muted.
take them, but I would take them, but I do not have room for them, sadly. I'd have to build by hand bookcases on every corner of my townhome to make that work.
How about 500 of them? Because the curio cabinet's going to need something in it. You can put my books in there.
No, it's true. It's true. It's actually, I'm open to the idea that I don't have anywhere to put curio cabinets as well, but I'm still going to try to do it.
The fetching Mrs. Hewitt yesterday told me that her brother and she spent 15 minutes talking about how someone on Facebook Marketplace agreed to take his piano off his hands. I don't think anyone wants a piano anymore unless they've got like a 10-year-old, right?
Even then, not so much. And it actually is a sad sort of mark of societal decline that a lot of people did learn to play piano. A lot of people learned to play piano for church. This tradition doesn't exist in the same way it did anymore. And pianos are so heavy and such a large part of the landscape, if you put them in your living room, that a lot of people don't want that size. In fact, I was a piano player as a kid and had this upright, beautiful Victorian piano my parents had. And now I have a little digital one because that's how technology changed. And I feel a little bit like a traitor and I should have the old one maybe.
Are you going to take their piano along with the curio cabinet?
I mean, look, I need more square footage for that, Hugh. So I got to figure it out.
All right, now I want to go to your trip to New York. You actually went into the M&M store. I've gone by the M&M store 1,000 times. I've never, ever had even a hint of wanting to go into the M&M store, but you liked it.
Sometimes you go to a tourist trap and you're like, oh, this is why tourists go here. This is fun. And that's what happened to me. That's what happens to me at a lot of places in like Gatlinburg, Tennessee. I'm like, oh, I'm here for this. I'm here for the fun.
I caught in your M&M riff with Vic on Getting Hammered a reference to 70s brown. And
Yes.
I don't think you're actually acquainted with the 70s well. I don't know if your parents have actually shown you how hideous the 70s were or if they've shown you any of their prom pictures. Have they?
My mother's bridesmaid dresses were puff-sleeved and lime green and mustard yellow floral. It was like perfectly 1971. And I believe she still has one. I should borrow it, actually.
I would like to know if your dad has a picture of a high school prom, because mine have been destroyed, and they're not coming back for a good reason.
Look, it's a kitschy look, okay? If you want, and it's not like I'm gonna do my whole house in a 70s theme, but if I find an M&M's hat that has that like 2 colors of brown, some orange, some yellow, yeah, that's a good look.
They used to make pants in stripes like that, and some people I knew unfortunately wore them. Let's get to the serious stuff. It's Gotcha Day.
Okay.
You had taped all of I had written my columns. We'd been talking about tariffs. Turns out it was a gotcha. I told everyone not to sell into a panic. I hope they didn't sell any stocks. What do you make of today?
So I was like, I'm a medium panicking. I'm just kidding. I was fairly chill. I was worried about a self-destructive move here. I remain worried because uncertainty remains a problem. If you have a guy who's in charge of tariffs who wants to globally manage the entire economy, I'm not a big central planning person. I don't want him doing the managing for the entire global economy, even though I think he makes some fair arguments about unfair trade practices. I want to get closer to 0 for 0 tariffs in a bunch of places. And if he gets us closer to that, fine. I just think this is a risky way of doing business. And the more we can hammer China and not countries that are willing to work with us, the better. I appreciate that message coming out today. But I continue to be concerned about capital investment when everyone's like, he could change the rules of the game at any moment.
Well, I don't think he can. And I had raised the prospect of the IAEA, International Economic Emergency Act, actually not giving the president this much power, and perhaps they were going to find out. Now we don't know. It's mooted, or at least it will never be right. A couple technical terms there for the lawyers. But I'm happy where we are. I thought it would take 6 months to get here. I'm glad it took 6 days. What I'm not, and I want your assessment of, I am not sanguine about the House GOP not being stupid beyond stupid. Stupid is as stupid does. House Freedom Caucus members, are they going to go south on us and dump the budget in a grandstanding move that is self-destructive?
I can always rely on them to be self-destructive, but I hope not. I have been worried all along, like what exactly the plan is, because the margins are so slim there, and I don't feel like anybody's been talking about a strategy that I felt like made a ton of sense. And I'm not the greatest congressional tea leaf reader in the world, and things that can be as fluid as they are with Trump when it comes to the House. But some of the sounds I've been hearing have not been great.
Well, do you think the panic and the non-panic and the swings of the last week might incline some of the members to think back to the TARP vote of 2008 when they crashed the market for a day and then they got back to their office and had thousands of phone calls from irate? Because I actually think their constituents will be very angry if they block this bill.
Yeah, I think they need to be wary of that. I also think when it comes to, like, we're coming up on the fiscal cliff and the end of these, the 2017 Trump tax cuts, right? Like, there has to be a plan. There has to be cohesiveness. There has to be a way of putting people's priorities first. And if they drop the ball, we're in bad shape.
So as I see it, the House wanted one big, beautiful bill, and they passed it. The Senate wanted two. Senate gave them one, but they added a couple of lines, what they wanted. And now a handful of House members say that wasn't good enough. I don't think the handful of House members should be. I think they will be ostracized if they do this, if they kill them.
I think you're likely right. We've had other situations where people who are ostracized survive anyway. So it's like if they're in safe districts, it can be not necessarily a downside for them to be oppositional. However, in this case, one way to get certainty about the future for businesses when maybe Trump is not giving it is to make sure that your business gets done in the House.
Maybe we should ask Representative Good. Oh, he got primaried and got beat. Let's hope they remember him. Mary Catherine Ham of Getting Hammered. Follow her on X at MK Hammer. Go get Getting Hammered. Like and subscribe with Vic Mattis, as I recommend you do every week. One of our great sponsors is myphdweightloss.com. I'm sure they have advice on stress eating. And today, I don't know if they have stress dieting, because today, the market at this hour into the close, the Dow is up 8%, the S&P is up almost 10%, the Nasdaq's up about 12%. I've never seen a day like this. What would myphdweightloss.com tell you about a day like, or a week like this, Dwayne?
They would say keep it cool, keep calm. Keep calm and diet on.
Have some celery.
Yes. Well, not celery or a protein bar, or just stick to the plan. Stick to the plan. Don't buy into a sour cream or onion dip.
Don't sell into a panic. Don't buy into the dips during a panic.
Yes.
There are two things. Don't sell your stocks. Don't buy the high carb.
Yeah, don't buy into an avocado dip.
864-644-1900. Wait, do avocado dips have a lot of calories? I don't like avocados, so I don't care.
Well, it's what's mixed in with the avocados.
What's in there?
All sorts of little oils and sauces and things.
864-644-1900. That's
864-644-1900.
If you're a new listener or watcher on the Salem News Channel, Dwayne lost 50 pounds over the course of, that was, my gosh, almost 2 years ago.
Yep.
Kept it off. And every day or every couple of days, we tell you, you don't have to be as big as you are if you don't want to be as big as you are. If you're that big, we're fine. No judgment. Nothing wrong with that.
But your weight does not have to fluctuate like the stock market.
No, you can actually gradually rise or gradually fall.
Yes.
And if you want to gradually fall, myphdweightloss.com is for you. Can we get one more cut, President Trump, please? Cut number 21 on the White House front lawn today.
I watched Jamie Dimon on Maria Bartiromo's show this morning, and he was very good. He said that actually made the statement to effect that something had to be done with the tariffs and trade. He said that. He said, look, at some point, but he said something has to be done with tariffs and trade. He understood it. He's very smart and very genius financially. He's done a fantastic job at the bank. And he knows that. Everybody knows that. Anybody that's even a little bit smart knows it. It wasn't sustainable what was happening. Somebody had to pull the trigger. I was willing to pull the trigger. This should have been done long ago. Just like Biden should have stopped the border long ago. I mean, allowed 21 million people plus into our country, many of whom should never have been allowed out of prisons and jails. They came out of prisons and jails from all over the world. And now we're getting them out, bringing them back to their countries. But it's should have never been done.
Somebody had to pull the trigger. He's Yosemite Sam of pulling triggers. And if you don't know who that is, go look him up. It's been a wild week. Special treat. From Israel, I'm joined by Gadi Taub. Gadi is a journalist of long standing in Israel. He's a friend of our friend, Bethany Mandel, who pointed out to me his long-form interview with Prime Minister Netanyahu, which is very rare to see. Luckily, the Hebrew had subtitles, so I was able to read along. Gadi Taub, welcome to the program. Would you start off by telling the audience your background in journalism in Israel?
Hello, you. Yes, it's a pleasure to be here. And I'm actually trained as a historian of the United States, actually. My PhD is from Rutgers University. And I started by writing fiction and nonfiction. And then politics sort of pulled me in, and things are so tumultuous in this country that it's hard to raise your head above the everyday occurrences. So I find myself doing a lot of journalism and a lot of long-form interviews.
Well, I have two divides into which our 11 minutes can go. First, the interview with the Prime Minister. It revealed to me what I had long suspected. The divide between Joe Biden increased as his infirmity and cognitive difficulties increased, and his team really separated. And the Prime Minister confirmed that to you. Is that a fair statement for the American audience to hear?
Absolutely. I think the Prime Minister was extremely frustrated with the behavior of the Biden administration, both personally and, of course, above all, nationally, because there was an inevitable clash that's been brewing for a while between the Obama doctrine of the Middle East and Netanyahu's view of what Israel should focus on, which is Iran. And the Biden administration, being a continuation or a third term for Obama, tried to appease Iran and create what they call regional integration. When you ask yourself, what is there to integrate? Apparently, you are supposed to integrate a neo-Nazi genocidal regime which is striving to get a nuclear weapon. Israel cannot afford that, and all of Netanyahu's energies were concentrated on this for maybe 2 decades. That was his first priority. So he couldn't reach an ideological agreement. And as a Prime Minister of Israel, he had to maneuver under very uncomfortable superpower machinations in the Middle East, but he managed to do something incredible, in my opinion. Despite American resistance, despite a almost full weapons embargo during most of this war, he managed to make a sweeping movement from beginning in Gaza and then taking the war over and against Biden's resistance into Lebanon by doing things like the Beeper operation, and then taking down Nasrallah, who has American blood to his elbows on his hands. And therefore, he managed to roll this war and get it all the way to the outskirts of Tehran. And in the end, after he left Biden's strategy of the Middle East, or his team's strategy, or Blinken's strategy, or Obama's strategy in shambles, then Biden took credit for curtailing Iran's power. But it was done against American resistance.
Well, the easiest to remember moment of idiocy on the American side is when Vice President Harris said she'd studied the maps of Rafah and Israel can't operate in there. Yeah. And that simply was the peak pressure moment, and Israel didn't bend. This week I had on Douglas Murray, who's written this fascinating new book on democracies and death cults. Douglas, like me, Gentiles. We love Israel because it's our strategic ally of his country, the United Kingdom, my country, the United States, and they are with us in everything. Did the average Israeli feel betrayal by the United States in the course of its traumatic 18-month war, which is still ongoing?
It's a very complicated question, because the press here is like the American press. It's completely biased and left-wing, and it was supportive of the Biden administration's attitude, which undermined Netanyahu. Because what the left here wanted was they actually cheered, as strange as it may sound to American ear, they were actually rooting for Kamala Harris to win against Trump, because in their view, they've lost the hope of convincing the Israeli public to return to the two-state solution track. And what they still hope to achieve is completely dependent on America forcing our hand. So they hoped that there would be a woke, progressive American administration which would force Israel to make concessions to the Palestinians. Most Israelis, especially after October 7th, think that that is suicidal. So the press loved Biden, but Israelis gradually understood that he's not exactly our friend. I must tell you, I'm a pundit on Channel 14 often, and I have my own conservative podcast. And from the minute Biden landed here, I said, don't be fooled by this rhetoric. This is not our friend. And when he said don't, he also meant Israel. Don't invade Lebanon. And we had to invade Lebanon. And
very perceptive,
everybody.
Gotti. Have you come to the conclusion that the Democratic Party has shifted inalterably into an anti-Israel stance? Because President Obama was probably the most anti-Israel president we've had since 1948, founding of the state. President Trump is at least the equal of Nixon during the Yom Kippur War and may prove to be even greater than Richard Nixon was during the Yom Kippur War. And I don't think there's any daylight left, but I think the Democratic Party has made a shift. Do you perceive that from your position?
Absolutely. And as I said, I'm a student of American history. And as far as I can see, Obama was the first disciple of Edward Said to occupy the White House. He was sort of a pro-third world president, more than he was pro-Western, even more than he was pro-American. And this was extremely dangerous for Israel. This administration was also very sophisticated. So it sold to the American public a nuclear deal that would actually give the Iranians the bomb. They sold it as a form of containment. And we were unable to get the message through, although, as you know, Netanyahu tried when he defied Obama and spoke to the joint session of the two houses of Congress. But what is happening to the Democratic Party is terrible. They support anti-American and anti-Israeli things. And lo and behold, the anti-American and the anti-Israel often go together, which is why the way I see it, this party would have to, I hope, completely reassess its own course. And I hope that it would come back to American values and so also to the friendship with Israel. I'm also worried about what is happening on the margins of MAGA with people like Tucker Carlson and other isolationists beginning to hint that Israel is the source of trouble rather than the loyal, dependable ally. But the mainstream of the GOP and certainly the Trump administration is pro-Israel and understands us, I think, deeply.
The real problem is Candace Owens and the return of anti-Semitism to a public stage without vast condemnation. Tucker and those who are very suspicious of foreign entanglements are burned by the last 20 years of the long war, but they can't ignore the problem of Iran having a nuclear weapon. Maybe they can. I don't want to speak for anyone. I can't. And I'm hoping Trump acts. Are you an optimist that after the 60-day, quote, negotiation, that bombs will drop as the president has threatened? Because I don't believe Iran will negotiate and open up their nuclear site. They just won't. I don't believe it.
You know, I asked this question the prime minister. In this interview, he laid out the whole course of the war, and you could see how he thinks about it. And I also ventured into the future and asked the prime minister, if Trump brings an agreement in which all the centrifuges, correct my English if my pronunciation is wrong, are dismantled, would that be enough for Israel? Would you, the prime minister, be satisfied? And he had this bemused look on his face, and he only said this. He said, do you trust the Iranians? And that was all he would comment. So I'm guessing he's not happy with anything less than a military takeout. And I have to tell you personally, I think Trump is very serious about dismantling Iran's nuclear program. And once he sees that negotiations would not do it, I think he would do the right thing.
So, Gotti, I want to ask you one thing as an American I'm confounded by. Israel does not have a written constitution. We do. I teach constitutional law and have for 27 years. I do not understand how the Israeli Supreme Court can interfere with the firing of the Shin Bet parallel to MI5-6 merged or the FBI with a little bit of CIA thrown in. It's kind of hard to find a parallel. how they can intervene in that, and how your attorney general can be so rogue. She
Okay,
just
stay
obviously
right there. I will continue talking with Mr. Taub after the break. In fact, I'll post it all on YouTube because the AG stuff gets very complicated in a hurry on Israeli law. So just pause. Gadi Taub will be back. And I've also got John Campbell coming up on the market close, which was remarkable. The NASDAQ up more than 12% today. That's really remarkable. So if you're watching on the Salem News Channel, that is Congressman John Campbell, formerly a member of the House Financial Services Committee and the Budget Committee. And so he can explain for us, is it likely that the Republicans who voted to pass the budget rule moments ago, 216 to 215, that any of them would defect on the budget itself?
That's very unlikely. It is, if you want to stop something, it is much easier and more effective to use the rule to do it than it is to actually vote no on the floor, unless you just want to let the thing go to the floor. You know it's going to pass. You're okay with that, but you want a no vote. Now, that's fine if Republicans had a 20-seat majority, but they don't. So there aren't more than, 2 or 3 people that could do that if they wanted to. So I think that's unlikely. I think if they voted for it in the rule, they'll vote for it on the floor.
Now, I wrote a column and filed it already for Fox News tomorrow, before the announcement by the president, Scott Bessant, and this remarkable market rally, which we'll talk about, suggesting that market turmoil would be increased, volatility would increase if the budget failed. Do you agree with that?
If the
budget
tax
did not
increase,
pass?
I think, yes, I think markets and the economy is expecting that the 2017 tax cuts are going to be extended with modifications. And we don't know what those modifications are going to be yet. And in fact, I don't think Speaker Johnson knows what those modifications are going to be yet. That's something that will be worked out over the next month to 2 months, hopefully not much longer than that. But the market's expecting at the moment that there will be a tax bill, there will be an extension of the debt limit, and that all this will happen sometime by the 4th of July.
And there will be a border wall, energy productivity enhancements, and a huge defense dollop.
Right, and that all that will be a part of it. And if that breaks down or blows up, I think markets would not like that.
So give me your general reaction to the week that was, John, because you follow this fairly closely. I know you're like me. You never sell in a panic. You're an investor, not a speculator or a trader. What'd you make of this whole funny week?
Yeah, and to that last point, as I explained to a number of my friends, I have not bought or sold anything in this whole last week. So I like where I had my portfolio positioned for the long term. Still think it's good for the long term. And I literally didn't buy or sell a thing. So I just stayed where I was. What I think is there's a couple things going on here. First, the market itself. Realize that this market is extremely high in any metric you want to look at versus the Buffett metric, which is what is the market value versus gross domestic product versus GDP, or in terms of price earnings ratios, or in terms of what the return of the market is versus the return on bonds. On all these ratios, it's as high as it's ever been. It's 1929 level highs. So there's a bunch of people, and I'm number myself amongst those, that think it just can't stay here, that fundamentals eventually do matter, that buying stock in a company because you think someone else will buy it for more than you paid for it runs out eventually. And eventually you want that company to make money, generate cash, and send some of it to you. And so I think the market had to come down at some point. We didn't know what the trigger was going to be. So the Trump tariffs have been a trigger. They may not be the only trigger. They may not be the last trigger. But the fact that the market came down, I think, is actually healthy. I think it's something that needed to occur. Now, it's happened really quickly and so forth. But then the other thing is, of course, the tariffs themselves. And people in the market are generally wealthier people, they're 10%, top 10 people that are in there every day, that are writing about it, that are talking about it. They're top 10% people. They have a lot of money in the market. They don't want it to go down ever. They see it go down, they panic, and they rip on the tariffs. And they're remembering their economics class that they took in 1982 at Cornell. And there they learned that tariffs were bad. And so they figure tariffs are bad. I don't think it's at all that simple. And I actually, Donald Trump's a very smart guy. And he has accomplished a lot of things that people didn't think he could accomplish, whether it was winning in 2016 and winning again in 2024, or dodging an assassin's bullet, or having all these lawsuits against him and coming through on the other end. Kind of like an Elon Musk. Elon Musk Tesla should not have succeeded. SpaceX should not have succeeded. A bunch of these things he did should not, but they did, because these guys are smart and they know what they're doing, and they get out there. And I think Trump was doing that, and he surrounded himself with a lot of smart people. And I believe, I don't know they're doing the right thing, but I have faith that they are doing the right thing, and that the world order of trade does need reordering. And I know you're talking about China, and that's obviously the big bugaboo, and that's the one that needs to be changed the most. But that's not the only one. We can't be a country of just software engineers. We have to make stuff again. And we have to not only grow our food, but we have to make stuff for defense, and we have to make stuff for our computers, because we're so reliant on these computers these days. And we have to make stuff we just need to make stuff again. And we for a long time, we decided that, let other people do that. Let slave labor in China do it. And he's bringing us back to where I think we need to be. So I'm supportive of what's going on.
Well, I all week long I was saying, wait 6 months and I'll tell you what I think about it. Took 6 days. And I like clarity about China. They are our enemy. They don't play fair. They cheat. They steal intellectual property. They lie to us. They renege on deals. They bludgeon their allies. Cambodia, for example, is simply a vassal state of China now. And so I was happy to wait and see, but I don't think the bond market wanted to wait and see 6 months. Do you think that added to the accelerant for his 90-day pause?
The bond market's been all over the place, and there's a lot of reasons I'm reading about it. I don't know what's right and what's wrong, and I'm not sure the people writing about it, even though that's what they do every day, know for sure. But there's a lot of belief that what's happened with the 10-year interest rate, which shot back up just in the last 48 hours, was about trades unwinding. And without boring your audience, both on TV and radio completely, that people had to sell bonds to take care of debt obligations and other obligations that they have. And so before we know I'm not sure we know what the bond market's saying yet. And so I think we need to be careful about that. But it's not just about China. I just want to give you one little example. As I think you know, I have a small herd of cattle and a cattle ranch in Kansas. And so this is amongst the markets that I follow. And there are a lot of our trading partners. We make great beef in the United States, right? We raise great cattle. And a lot of people around the world want to buy our beef because they've watched American Westerns and they know we drive cattle across the plains and that, we've been about cattle and beef since there's been cattle and beef.
Wait, before you go full cowboy, let me go to break. I want people to be able to see this and hear this. So we're going to go to break and come back after the break on the Salem News Channel, Salem Radio Network, all the affiliates. Don't go anywhere. Keep watching, keep listening. We're going to hear about John Campbell Cowboy and his cattle and where he can't sell his cattle. I've never seen the cattle, actually, so I don't even know if this is real, but we'll find out. With Cowboy Campbell, John Campbell is talking about cattle and cows and non-tariff trade barriers. Who's not buying your cows, John?
Oh, that's such great cattle cattle ranching music. Being cattle ranchers, tough business. We'd like to export beef, but what a lot of countries do is they put non-tariff, Trump talked a lot about non-tariff barriers. What a lot of countries, the EU and a whole lot of friendly countries, do on American beef is they put a health and safety standard on it. You say, well, what's wrong with that? Nothing, except that they don't have that same health and safety standard on their domestically produced beef. So they put a different standard on our beef than they do on theirs to make ours more expensive. along with the tariff, so it won't compete with their domestically produced beef. So why are they doing that? They do that because they want to protect their own beef, their own cattle industry that they have. Okay, I get that. That's why this whole notion that we've had free trade since World War II is not true. It's countries all over the world have, except the US, have been protecting particular industries that they want to protect. And in many cases, they have a real reason to do that. Countries want to grow their own food. I get that. You don't want to be dependent on another country for food. But, if you're going to do that and you're going to protect that industry in your country, then we get to protect some in ours. I mean, Trump talked a lot about the tariffs on rice in Japan. Rice in Japan is like bread for the rest of the world. It is the staple. It is the thing everybody eats. A lot of places can produce rice pretty darn cheap and ship it into Japan. And they would put all the Japanese rice farmers out of business. They don't want to do that. So they tariff all their rice. That's fine. That's great. Okay, maybe we don't want to put our car factories out of business. So maybe we tariff Japanese cars 100%. You tariff your rice. That's fine. Protect your rice industry. We're going to protect our car industry. So we're going to tariff cars 100%.
And by the way, in Wisconsin, I've always been flummoxed by the fact that Canada won't let us sell Wisconsin dairy products in Canada. I just think that's nuts. It's crazy.
They're protecting their dairy industry because they think that not just Wisconsin, but Minnesota and Michigan and New York and all that are close to the border that we're gonna send dairy products in there, and maybe they'll be cheaper, maybe they'll be better, maybe we'll underprice them for a while, whatever, and it's gonna drive their dairy industry. So they're protecting their dairy industry. Fine, I get it. That's their right to do that. But then it's our right to protect some of our industries that we want to protect. If you're not going to let our dairy products in there, maybe we don't let some of your stuff into here. And so that's why this is a give and take. It's a tit for tat. China's the worst offender by far. No question about that. Absolutely no question about that. And that's the big kahuna here. But it's not just about China.
All right, last question. What about the 10% minimum tariff, which is staying in place? One of the explanations I've seen, I don't try and read Trump's mind, that's a fool's game, is that he made a lot of noise, and at the end of the day, there's a new 10% global tariff that people are happy with.
So what's your question then?
Do you think that's what he did? That he just made a lot of smoke and noise so that he could get this done? The 10% for the world and China gets hammered.
Well, I don't. I think they will have, as he said, bespoke. That's what the term that Bessant, Secretary Bessant said today was they were going to do bespoke negotiations with all these 70 or 75 countries. So they're going to do bilateral negotiations, just the U.S. and whatever, with all these countries because of what I just went through. Each country is different. Each country's tariffs are different. Each country's industries and things they want to protect of themselves are different. And in each case, what they ship to us is different that we buy from them. So I don't think it's just about China. I think it is about all these other countries. I think the 10% is partially there because it's Trump continuing to say, all right, we're backing off for 90 days, but we're reordering things. We are reordering world trade.
And so I'm still in my 6 month wait.
And he wants revenue.
Cowboy John Campbell, thank you for joining us. Come back next week. We'll check the beef futures. Thank you, friend. Selena Zito is my guest. She is our Yinzer report. She went full Yinzer this week for the Washington Post. She put on the hard hat. She went into the mill. My goodness, I'm glad that there's still a mill somewhere in Pittsburgh region. Selena, tell us about that trip.
It was really an honor of a lifetime as a journalist. I've followed the steel industry all of my life, have never been able to get inside the mill, but I think I just wore them down.
Well, there's a reason for that. It's dangerous, right?
I know, but I go in coal mines. I've been out with the Coast Guard on the ocean. I'm all right with danger.
I've driven with Dwayne. So I've got that on you.
Oh, God bless you. Okay, you win. It was amazing. It was an amazing experience. I got to go into the oldest hot rolling mill in the world. It was an extraordinary experience. The entire sight and sound and feel and smell of being inside that mill just said work. And it's really interesting. Oh yes, it's a physical job, but it's also a very high tech job. And the way that they use technology in the production of steel and the way that they've streamlined it is really extraordinary to watch.
You know,
So it's
Selena's,
in
you know,
there.
the closest most Americans have been to an actual mill is the opening scenes from The Deer Hunter. They really don't know. I didn't go, I'm not a mill guy. My brothers worked in the mills during the summer. I became a lifeguard because they came home sweaty, tired, and often damaged. It's hard work.
It's hard work. It's absolutely hard work, but you know what? They love what they do. And they feel you really have to get inside their head because they really feel what they do isn't a job or a career. It is patriotic to them because they build things that make Americans' lives better, from your appliances to your cars, but also bridges, infrastructure, roads. But also, if we're engaged in anything militarily, they're the guys that keep our men and women in the military safe with the vehicles and the armor that they build. So they feel as though they're not just at a job, that they're part of
You
something
described
bigger
going
themselves.
up a big hill. By the way, the Washington Post column that Selena wrote is free if you link onto it via her her X account at Zito Selena. Did you get a lot of good comments on that, or were the trolls out?
No, I had a ton of great comments on it, and it really was exciting for me to have a story that was very much understood the working man and woman in this country, but also understood tariffs and understood why the working class moved towards Trump. To be the most read story on their website for 2 days was pretty awesome.
Oh, that is very, very good. I didn't know that. The most read story on the Post website, which gets a lot of traffic. Tell me about the foreman who took you around. Who's the guy?
So Don German is the guy. He is the plant manager, and he's by training he is a chemical engineer. Really smart guy. Reminds me of Bruno Kirby. Just that sort of effervescent but a little edgy, hardworking guy. And he's the plant manager, right? He's management, but the relationship between him and the union is extraordinary, and that's not something that is ordinarily happens. But they're all very sort of interconnected and supportive of saving the plant, saving steelworking in Western Pennsylvania, and they're supportive of the Nippon deal, very much so.
Now, you also conveyed scale in the piece, Selena, not just on the approach up the hill, which was a nice way to open the piece. But how long were you in it? It must have taken some time to just walk the floor.
Oh yeah, it's over 1.5 miles long, just the plant itself. The campus itself is even much more massive. And the steel comes rolling out of the furnace for a quarter mile. And it's just incredible to watch. I hope people check it out because they can see the photos and they're so vivid, and it really puts you on the shop floor. But yeah, it's massive. Everything there is big. Everything there smells of work. Everybody is working.
Now, you did not mention breakdown by race, gender, class, etc. Was anyone concerned with DEI inside the mill?
No. No, not at all. That's always in terms of jobs in the steel mill. That's always been racially diverse, just naturally, especially because of the way that people migrated to work in the mill. They didn't just come from Eastern European countries or Italy or Poland or Germany or wherever, Hungary, to work there. They also migrated up from the South after Reconstruction and continue to migrate through the middle of the 20th century. So there is a very diverse population in the mill.
So I'm curious, did you find any father-son teams or father-daughter teams? Because there was a time when families worked in factories, and they stayed in the same factory, and
Oh.
Junior would come along.
Yeah, absolutely. There are and there are guys there that are fourth generation. Not only had they worked with their father or do work with their father, and women too. There's a $1 million truck that I got to drive, and the person who let me drive her truck, and it goes down what they call Highway 1, which isn't really a highway. It's just in the middle of the mill, and it takes the coils to the short line to get those out into the into commerce. But you know, there are guys and women there that work for or fourth generation who have worked in that mill.
You drove the $1 million truck. How fast did you drive the $1 million truck?
It doesn't go fast.
No, I was going to guess.
But there's some photos of me.
All right. So head over to the Washington Post. The best way to get it, because it is a free gift, you don't have to subscribe to the Post to get it, is to go over to the X account at Zito Selena, and there's a gift, an opportunity to read her work. Selena, it's a fine bit of writing. Congratulations. Really a wonderful piece, and I thought probably long overdue. What's really odd is that will strike people as anachronistic that such a place exists. It's not. It's been there forever, and we need it to stay there forever. I hope the president does approve the Nippon deal. Not in any small part because of the work of Selena Zito. For everything Selena, go to selenazito.com. I want to tell you about two trips. I had Gotti Taub on earlier. That's posted over at my YouTube channel. You saw him here on the Salem News Channel. You listened to him on their show. If you were listening to the second hour, Gotti will be back. He's a fabulous journalist in Israel. And I had him on because Israel is our strategic ally, equal to any other ally. Good to see Prime Minister Netanyahu back for a second time with President Trump this week. Hope President Trump gets over to Israel soon. I have a sponsor, the Israeli Tourism Ministry, and they urged me to urge you to go to Israel, and it really doesn't take much to urge me to urge you to go to Israel. I have been twice. I intend to go again. I would love to spend a month there. I've been working it out with the Jewish News Syndicate that I can broadcast from there. I'm not sure I can do Salem News Channel work from there. I got to figure that out. But I'd stay a month. I really would, because it's such a fabulous, wonderful land with friendly people and the most diverse everything. People, cultures, food, climates. I didn't get up to the Golan Heights. We were supposed to go, but there was a snowstorm. Last time I traveled, I went with Ambassador Bolton when he was the National Security Advisor, and we were supposed to trek up to the Golan Heights, and there was a blizzard. So in Israel, anything can happen. And I've never been to the Tel Aviv beaches, but I've gone to some of the historical sites. I've been out in the desert, been to the Dead Sea, but I want to go back. I want to spend a lot of time. The Fetching Mrs. Hewitt's been to Jericho. If you want to do that, just go to goisrael.com. Visit the Holy Land. Make your plans ahead of time. It's very, very safe. It's very, very welcoming. And I think it's actually kind of inexpensive right now. Goisrael.com. It is a wonderful, wonderful way to help plan your visit to Israel. Goisrael.com. Much more short term. May 1 and 2, I'm going to be at the Job Creators Network Freedom Fighters Summit in Savannah, Georgia. FMH is coming with me. I'll be there along with Governor Glenn Youngkin, Governor Brian Kemp. Hopefully I can find some time to lobby Governor Kemp into running for the Senate so that we keep the Senate not only at 53-47, but by the way, I think the House is going to pass the budget tonight. I hope so. Even though I have a column coming out tomorrow saying they've got to pass the budget. I don't care if they pass it tonight. Pass the budget. Yeah, there are deadlines and deadlines are deadlines. But your deadline for getting the Job Creators Network Summit is upon you. There are less than 100 tickets left. Head over to jcn2025summit.com. JCN, as in Job Creators Network, jcn2025summit.com. And if you are bringing two people, use the promo code SALEM, and you get 50% off the second ticket. That's jcn2025summit.com, promo code SALEM. Other people are going to be there are Grover Norquist, Stephen Moore, who's been on a lot of the networks today saying, see, I told you, gotcha. Just remember, I told you don't sell anything. Like John Campbell, don't sell anything, don't be a panican, be a Republican.
and hopefully the Republicans get the budget over the line today. That will be a wonderful day for the market tomorrow, I would expect, but don't trust me. I don't know what I'm talking about on markets. I just report. You decide. It was a wild day on the markets, but a good wild day. The Dow was up 7.87%, the S&P up 9.52%, and the NASDAQ up 12%. The 10-year Treasury went down to 4.35%. So if you're buying a house this week with our friends andrewandtodd.com, you're a happy person. andrewandtodd.com are with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. They sell you mortgages. They get mortgages for you because they are a lender, not a middle person. They actually arrange for you to get the loan. So if you've been watching the 10-year bounce up and down, don't worry about the 10-year. Worry about getting pre-approval for a mortgage that you can afford based upon your income. They'll also help you fix your credit. If you want to get money out of your house with a home equity line of credit, or you want to get a reverse mortgage and you're a senior and you're 62 years or older living in your principal residence, you never want to make another payment, that's what andrewandtodd.com do. Andrew Del Rey's been my friend for 20 plus years, Todd Avakian half that time. Andrew and I were in a Bible study together. You can trust these guys. You can trust Sierra Pacific Mortgage. They've done thousands of loans for my listeners. I've been on the air for 25 years, and Andrew and Todd have been with me a long time. Done my loan when I moved back to the Beltway. They've done Dwayne's loans for everyone in the Salem network. All I can tell you is you want to trust your banker, and you especially want to trust your lender, and you especially want people, you know what you really want? You want to be able to find your mortgage statement come tax time. We do that every March, and one of the small things I love about Sierra Pacific, it's a small thing, is that it's very, very easy to get your tax information at the end of the tax year. So don't forget andrewandtodd.com. 888-888-1172. 888-888-1172. The big story today was, though, the markets, and President Trump took to the White House, not the lawn. He's in front of the Charlie Cook joins me now. Charles C.W. Cook has been following the tariffs. He hates tariffs. He probably likes the pause. He probably doesn't like the way this happened. But let's start with constitutional law. Did you like the Supreme Court's decision yesterday, Charles C.W. Cook?
In the Alien Enemies Act case?
Yes.
Well, yeah, I thought they got it right.
They didn't decide the merits. That's the key thing.
No, they didn't. That's true. That's true.
But they said,
but I thought it was the right balance. Yeah. So Boasberg's intervention was too far, and this is a problem in American law at the moment with single judges on pretextual bases getting involved in issuing nationwide injunctions and really delaying core powers or delegated powers. So I am of the view that we do have a problem with that. But in this case, I just couldn't see how you could avoid this being litigated in a court. And I also couldn't see how you could avoid having the fundamental due process questions reviewed. I mean, if you look back at the 1948 Supreme Court decision that governs what we know of Alien Enemies Act jurisprudence, it does say in a footnote that the court gets to decide whether or not individuals are eligible for the statute and are 14 years old and so on. And the Trump administration, I think, wanted to use it to get around even that, just to say nothing is justiciable. We can get rid of anyone we want. And I think the court got it right in saying, no, you're not allowed to do that. But I also think the court got it right in saying, well, you can't have one judge saying where the issues are litigated. And, it struck me as about the right balance.
It struck me as very, very sound because it said, habeas, the great writ, lies where the body that is to be produced is. So habeas corpus, for the benefit of the Steelers fans, means produce the body. And you got to produce the body where the body. So the Trump team is going to send everyone to the Fifth Circuit, and they're all going to get a chance to say basically, I am not that person if they think it's the wrong person, or I am not part of TDA. I think that's about all they're going to get because there's also a hint. I don't know if you saw it, Charles, a hint in the per curiam opinion that the Alien Enemies Act is not susceptible to a lot of interpretation and manipulation by courts.
No, exactly. And I think, some of the critics of people who have taken the due process position that I have, they think that when we say that we want minimal due process, habeas really being the only part of it, that we want some 3-year prolonged ACLU-driven process where illegal immigrants are kept in the country. I mean, that is very much not what I want. I just think it is imperative, especially if you are not just deporting people, but are sending them to a foreign prison, to have that minimal due process standard where you can say, hey, I'm not that guy, or I wasn't in the gang. But beyond that, yeah, I think the court ought to indulge the administration insofar as it wants to get rid of people who shouldn't be here in the first place.
And the overwhelming of the courts or the immigration system by 20 million people has rendered it necessary to take extraordinary measures. But due process remains a fundamental of the common law and the United States law. It's called the Great Writ for a reason. Now let's go to tariffs. My favorite person thus far in the administration is Doug Burgum, but Scott Bessant's getting pretty high pretty quick. My least favorite person, a holdover from term one, is Peter Navarro, who I've known for 30 years. He's a left-wing no-growther who ran for mayor of San Diego and lost as a left-wing no-growther, ran for Congress as a left-wing no-growther, campaigning with Hillary Clinton and lost, ran for county supervisor in San Diego as a no-growther, is temperamentally unsuited for positions of responsibility. Trump likes him. I think he's an entertainer. I think he's like the court jester. Scott Bessant is everything that Peter Navarro isn't. So I'm happy where we are. And I thought we'd get there, but it would take 6 months. How do you assess this week?
Well, I think it's been fairly disastrous on a number of planes. First off, I think that Congress is not allowed to delegate as much power as it has to the executive to set tariff rates. Do
you think they actually delegate? I've looked at the International Economic Emergency Act, and I was with someone from the Nixon White House and the Ford White House last night who doesn't remember it giving anyone this kind of power, and he was there for the Nixon shock. So I think that First Circuit case might have worked.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's two elements to that, right? There's the fundamental question of delegation. Is Congress allowed to do this? And then there's a statutory question, did it? On both, I'm a no. Yeah. So I have a problem with the president having this much power. I don't want the courts to decide whether or not there's an emergency. I think that's a political question. But I do think the courts can say whether or not the statute gave this power to any president, and also whether it's allowed to. But that aside, on the merits of it, I mean, I just think this was a very bad way of going about this. Not least because it's alienated allies, it's damaged some relationships we need in fighting China, and it has suggested that the president has the right at any point to supersede trade agreements that have gone through Congress, which makes it quite difficult for other countries to trust us and for businesses to plan. Now, I'm not a fan of where we've ended up today because I think 10% flat rate tariffs are a bad idea. I do understand that the administration wants to now open negotiations, and if that ends up with lots of bilateral or group area free trade agreements, that's good. I also don't have a great problem with having high tariffs on China, but I do think you have to do it more slowly because we are reliant on China. I would like us not to be reliant on China, but there's a big difference between saying, let's decouple from China over 5 years as the result of a congressionally passed bill, maybe add 2% tariffs every month or whatever, allow people to get out, and saying 105% tariffs tomorrow, which means boats coming in from China tomorrow for American companies that have to plan are suddenly hit with these huge levies that will be passed on to consumers or that will be responsible for those businesses going under. So I just don't think this was done very well at all, irrespective of my view on tariffs, which is generally skeptical.
Now, Charles, I think it's a virtue to be able to understand the best argument on the other side. I'm a free trader, and I did not like the week that was. I'm happy we're back to normal, and I think it'll work out. But the best argument that can be made, and I hope you devote a whole Charles C.W. Cook podcast to this argument, is that in 1947, we were the only manufacturing country in the world left. We could afford the Marshall Plan. When the Soviet Union fell apart in 1991, we're the only superpower. We could afford to be the rich relative that bailed everyone out. But as John Campbell, a former congressman, was just explaining, there are non-tariff trade barriers around the world, like impositions that prohibit the sale of American beef around the world that are wholly made up. And the EU is the source of all evil here. So we had a round of shock therapy on the world, saying to them, no, you can't do this. You get to start for 50 seconds and I have to pause you and let you finish. What do you think?
Well, it's certainly an argument, although I think it's best dealt with by trade negotiations rather than this. But I'd also say that, ultimately when you put tariffs on consumer goods, you're hurting Americans. So, we can talk more after your break about that, but I just don't like this at all.
All right, I'm going to come right back with Charles C.W. Cook. We'll put on the podcast. I may play it tomorrow. You should listen to the editors, the National Review podcast, and to Charles's own podcast, available at iTunes, Apple, wherever podcasts available. Charles C.W. Cook on X as well. Charles, I want you to continue there. Let concede it hurt consumers. But what about the reset to reflect the reality that we are in a bipolar world in Cold War 2.0 and people have to choose sides?
Well, I agree they have to choose sides. I want them to choose sides, and I want us to alienate China, as I said earlier. But this is another reason that I'm worried. I mean, for example, in the first Trump administration, and I think this was good, the Trump plan was to try to get American companies to decouple from China. And it did that via a number of different mechanisms, one of which was tariffs, and it had some success. And so you have a company like Nintendo, for example, that moved its production out of China and into Vietnam and Bangladesh. But then last week, on so-called Liberation Day, Trump put 46% tariffs on both of those countries. Now, okay, today it's back down to 10, and they're going to have negotiations and hopefully come to a better free trade arrangement. But that doesn't help you in your aim of isolating China. You should be doing everything you can to make friends with and stay on the right side of Vietnam and Bangladesh and other countries that you want to use, assuming, of course, as I do, that not every piece of manufacturing in the world is coming back to America. So I just don't think this was done the right way, even if you take the shock and awe argument at face value.
Oh, at face value. The shock and awe is not intended by the trade negotiators, who are men and women in dark suits who meet in hotels around the world, and we don't know what they're doing. The shock and awe is intended for the world, that the United States is back and it's asserting primacy. And that's a little too MAGA for my taste. But I do understand there is value in having people realize we can do this. Is there not? Tell me if there's not. There's value in being the biggest bully on the block.
Yeah, I tend to think that more in military terms than in this realm. I don't think that this was productive. I'm not against the exercise of American power. I think there are certain circumstances where you have to, in a more narrow and tailored way, do what you said, but I want to see it done to individual countries or in response to bad behavior. I want to see it when we hit the Houthis. I don't have an issue, for example, if we think that a South American country is literally sending illegal immigrants or criminals to the United States. I don't have a problem using trade policy and saying we're more powerful than you, and we're going to use that power. But this was literally declaring a trade war on the entire world. The United Kingdom, Vietnam, Canada, Australia, and also many countries with which we have a trade surplus. The justification here was we're worried about trade deficit. Well, we did this to everyone. We did this to Brazil, which we have a trade surplus with.
I actually agree with you completely. I'd rather do it through awesome peace through strength. But we can't do that for a while till we rebuild that. Charles, I got to go back to the network. Thank you so much. Charles C.W. Cook on X. Go listen to his podcast. I hope he devotes an entire hour to this. Thank you, Charles. Once a month, I sit down with my friend Philip Balboni, the editor-in-chief of the Global Post, which I have here, my printed out Global Post, which I get every day. Today, Philip, you're talking about two countries about which I know little and learned a lot, Indonesia and Mozambique. I'm going to get to that, but first, I do know a lot about Italy. I've been there a few times. The ticketing crisis at the Coliseum comes as no surprise to me, Philip. Does it come as a surprise to you?
I guess not, Hugh. I mean, I love Italy, but the fact that these ticketing agencies have bought up all the tickets, and so ordinary folks couldn't get into the Coliseum, I guess we shouldn't be surprised about that.
Yeah, I put that down to the guy I hired to meet me at a cruise ship once who didn't show up and said, we didn't want to go. That's just Italy. Now let's go to Indonesia. I don't think I've learned anything about Indonesia since the year of living dangerously. And today's Global Post opens up with, I think, about 3,000 words on Indonesia. Wow, what a mess.
First of all, I just want to say for your listeners and viewers that Indonesia is probably the most important country in the world that is never in the news. And I mean, it's the fourth largest by population, right after the United States. It's the largest Muslim country in the world. Has a very strong economy, 17,000 islands, including some of the most beautiful and wild places left on this planet Earth. So it's a really important, interesting place. Um, Unfortunately, it has a long history of autocrats and violence, violence related to political protests, violence related to all those thousands of islands spread out, or kinds of insurgencies going on in many places. So they have a relatively new president whose name is Prabowo. The Indonesians, many of them tend to go by just a single name. He actually has two, but he mostly uses one name. And he promised people that he would reform the economy and make things a lot better. But, as often happens, it's not turning out that way. Things are actually getting worse. Young people are unhappy. Protests are happening again. He's probably going to crack down, and we'll have to watch and see where
Philip,
things go
where
from
do
here.
they stand on the spectrum of allies with the United States versus allies with China? I really don't have a good fix on where Indonesia is in the world political order.
That's a really good question, Hugh. They're certainly very friendly with China, but they're not unfriendly to the United States either. It's not like the Philippines, the next country north of Indonesia, which has become again a very close ally of the United States with a lot of military bases and infrastructure there. That is not the case in Indonesia, but we have a lot of trade with Indonesia. President Trump, before he reversed his tariffs today, I'm sure you've been talking about it on the show.
Yes.
Indonesia with a 32% tariff, which is below, Vietnam and certainly below China, but not favored by any means. But they're friendly with the United States. We don't really have any problems with Indonesia.
So we'll watch that. And one of the reasons you should get the Global Post, and by the way, it's free for teachers and students. Go to globalpost.com, find on the toolbar, teachers and students, free subscription, use it in your classroom, get smart. One of the reasons you read it is to find out there's this magnificently enormous and diverse country that's teetering on the blink of what appears a reversion to dictatorship. That was the bottom line I took away. Am I wrong, Philip Baldoni? That looks like they're going back to Suharto days.
Exactly, and Suharto was president for 31 years, from 1967 to 1998, and he was forced to resign by student protests. So it's a little bit of Back to the Future here.
All right, now let's do Mozambique while we have a moment. It is on the coast of Africa, below Tanzania, and adjacent to South Africa. Why are we writing about it today?
Well, we're writing about it today because there have been difficulties over an election that happened earlier this year. The party, the Frelimo party, that's been in power since the independence of the country, some 50 years ago. People have been unhappy with the performance, corruption, and things not trickling down to the people. Mozambique has enormous oil and natural gas reserves off the coast, and so there is wealth in that country. There's also a lot of jihadism in Mozambique, which is sadly one of the things that we're seeing across Africa. I think we talked about this on an earlier program, Hugh, that the Islamic State has outposts across Central Africa, and now in southern Africa, in Mozambique. This is something that Americans should be very concerned about. You mentioned Tanzania to the north, one of the great places for wildlife viewing, safaris. I've had the great good fortune of being there myself. And so the instability caused by problems with elections, it's a familiar story, by autocracy and people in power who don't want to give up power, does breed discontent. And where there is an Islamic State, they can take advantage of that. And they are in Mozambique.
Philip Alboni, thank you. I want to tell everyone we've just assumed stability in southern Africa since apartheid came down. It's vanishing in quick increments. That's chronicled in the Global Post. I repeat, globalpost.com is free for students and teachers. And if you just want to know what's going on in the world, you will be like me, a subscriber. Go to globalpost.com. Philip Alboni puts out a great product every single morning, news from around the world, from small and funny things about not being able to get tickets to go into the Colosseum in Rome to big important things like Indonesia and Mozambique. Thank you, Philip. Sarah Bedford is a political investigative reporter with the Washington Examiner. I like to say now my colleague, since I write for the Examiner twice a month. Sarah, the rule passed in the House on the budget, meaning that the GOP is this close to unlocking reconciliation. Will they get it over the line today?
That is a really tough question, Hugh. At the current moment, it's not looking super great for Mike Johnson. You had a number of House Republicans who voted yes on the rule, but who have said they're going to vote against the budget on the floor. They want the Senate to make firmer commitments to spending cuts before they get this over the finish line. And some of those holdouts have said there's nothing the White House or Mike Johnson can do to change my mind. So I think the numbers are looking tough for Mike Johnson right now. But listen, they've gotten hard stuff over the finish line before. So it's possible that this could still get done. But at the moment, it's looking difficult for House Republicans.
How many people are you worried about?
Right now, let me see. I'm 1, 2, 3, 4. I've got 4 or 5 names written down here. I think the number could be as high as 8 or 9. But those talks are going on with Senate Republicans right now to assuage the concerns of those members. They say that the Senate Republicans should be doing the heavy lifting, not the House. The numbers are better for Republicans in the Senate. There are, fewer vulnerable members who are going to be up in November, and so the Senate should be doing the heavy lifting and making commitments. The Senate's really squeamish about anything that looks like it could be cutting Medicaid, for example, and other vulnerable votes. And so, the House Republicans' argument right now is that it should be the Senate that's walking the plank, not the House. So those talks are going on right now to reconcile the two different visions that we have going on here.
Now, Sarah, if they vote no, it's done, right? The Senate they have to start over. Am I right about that?
Right,
or is there a motion to reconsider? Or is there an amendment? They have to volley it back. Either way, the markets will get spooked again.
Right. And time is not on the side of the Republicans, right? The longer that this drags on, the less likely that we'll get over the finish line. That's why you had Johnson today saying speed is really important. The numbers, the political calculations, they don't get better after the Easter recess. They never get better. And in fact, every day that members get closer to the midterms, the leverage lessens for Republicans to get this over the finish line. I think the problem is that both the House budget and the Senate version of the budget were being held together with glue and tape, right, to get through the very specific dynamics of each chamber. And now neither side wants to make changes to what they finally got over the finish line because it was so difficult in the first place because of the specific concerns of Senate Republicans with the math there not being great, and also the specific concerns of House Republicans. And both Thune and Johnson are sort of pointing fingers saying, how about you make changes? Because my job was tough getting as far as we have already. And so right now it's kind of a game of chicken. It's not clear who's going to blink first.
But as a practical matter, if they don't pass the budget in the House, they start over. And if they start over, they lose momentum. And the House can fix whatever they don't want to fix in the reconciliation bills. I believe that is the case. And the 8 members in the House are putting their own particular views ahead of 53 senators and 205 members of the House, right?
Yeah, I mean, the argument against those 8 members holding this up is that they're letting perfect be the enemy of the good. They will not get a better bill than what is being discussed right now. It won't happen. Their leverage gets less and less every day that goes by. And, I think there's concerns among those fiscal hawks that the Senate is using this, some Republican hardliners have called magic math, to try to say that the extension of the Trump tax cuts doesn't cost anything. But setting that aside, they're not going to have a better chance than this to enact parts of Trump's agenda, possibly for the rest of Trump's presidency.
Well, that's it. Is President Trump on the phone? Is he talking to the mystery? The knucklehead caucus is at it again. And they're always selfish. A couple of them are principled. Thomas Massey is nuts. But is Donald Trump talking to him?
Absolutely. And, his personal touch was what got things over the finish line in the first place, right? Victoria Sparks said when the House passed its budget resolution that Trump's personal outreach was what got her over the finish line, for example. So that could happen again. You also have Trump's deputies. You have Russ Vought up there, Trump's legislative team working the phones. But then some Republican congressmen are saying, don't bother. Don't call me. It doesn't matter. You had some even refusing to go to the White House to talk to Donald Trump. So it's hard to see what the White House can do with members like that who are opposing anything on principle at this point.
If that happens, nightmare day on the markets tomorrow, because that really does imperil the tax cuts. But we'll keep up abreast with it via Sarah Bedford's reporting in the Washington Examiner. Follow her on X at Sarah C. Bedford. For many, many years, the secret weapon of the Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem News Channel and on the Salem Radio Network, every affiliate, has been Danielle Hitchen. She is the producing booker, which means that she arranges for everyone you hear on the Hugh Hewitt Show to show up at the appointed hour with the appointed technology working. And in the meantime, she works outside of the home. She has a lot of wonderful children, and she has become an author extraordinaire. Her latest book, just in time for Easter, is Hallelujah. It's the latest, and I think it's the 11th or the 12th in the Baby Believer series. Danielle, welcome. Let's start by telling people about the Baby Believer series, and then tell them how Hallelujah would be great for Easter.
Sure. Well, thank you again for having me, Hugh. It's delightful to be here today. And the Baby Believer series is a set of primer-style concept books to help children understand the core beliefs of the Christian faith and learn scripture alongside of learning concepts they need to learn anyway. So counting or opposites or colors or any of those sorts of things. And parents have all kinds of concept books on their shelves for their babies. So when I started this company, it just seemed to make sense that you would teach those concepts alongside of other foundational truths that your children should be learning. So
now, I call them cardboard books. What do you call them? To grandpas, they're books that the babies chew on, right? And at the same time, you read to them, and they're easy to turn. But what do you call them?
Board books. They're board books.
Board books, yeah. I love nice these board books. Fetching Mrs. Hewitt gives these as a baby shower, and you offer them in a package of 12 over it. Well, what's the easiest website? I go to Catechesis Books, but babybeliever.com?
Babybeliever.com works, or you can buy them wherever books are sold, basically.
All right, let's go to the latest in the babybeliever.com series, which is Hallelujah. I was surprised. I was not expecting Hebrew for beginners for babies, and here it is. Tell people how this came about.
Well, the publisher actually approached me about this concept and said, I think that people will love a book on Hebrew words. And I said, well, okay, let's see what we can come up with. And the thing is, the original, source language is so insightful when you are reading scripture and you understand, how did this translated word come to be? What we're reading. Why did we choose the word peace here or the word Messiah here versus potential other words? And so I pulled together 10 sort of foundational Hebrew words for Christians to think about and to more deeply understand things like kavod, which is glory, or Mashiach, which is Messiah, or shalom, which is peace. Some of these are probably familiar to Christians. Some of these may be new for them. But helping us develop a more deep understanding of what the Bible means when you read these words in the English Bible, I think is going to be really helpful for both adults and for children alike.
Yeah, I'm going to use a couple. Number one, Shabbat, as people can see on the Salem News Channel, I'm holding up the Shabbat card. It's a flashcard. Now, this is also new, right? You haven't done flashcards before, but Shabbat on one side, rest on the other side, Torah on one side, law instructions on another side. It's kind of interesting. Where did the flashcards idea come from?
That was also from my publisher, and the flashcards were available to anybody who pre-ordered the book, and I think we'll be making them available more widely within the next couple of months. But those were just like a bonus to help people get the pronunciation for the words and also learn a few additional words that were not in the book.
Now tell me a little bit about Jessica Blanchard, because you two must work very closely. You're the writer, you're the author, your illustrator is really gifted.
Yes, Jessica is so gifted, and I have been really blessed to work alongside her for all 12 of the Baby Believer books. She's another local mom, and she originally actually turned me down for this project because she said, "Oh, I'm not an illustrator," and we laugh about that now because her work is just so terrific and beautiful. But she has been such a tremendous partner in bringing the words to life for this series, and her work is absolutely gorgeous. I don't know if people can see on the screen, Salem News Channel, but this is one of my favorite spreads from the new book, Hallelujah, which talks about, praise the Lord, the resurrection, and the next one in here, Shalom, which is the ascension, Jesus's kingship, and bringing peace to all people. And she just takes these words and she makes the books so much better than I ever imagined that they could be with her art.
Well, I have it open to the end. Amen. Because I think it's just beautifully done. How close do you work with your illustrator? I've got a friend who's an illustrator, Steve, and lots of people want illustrators to do lots of things, and they wave off a lot of folks. How do you work with her when you see a picture? Do you just accept it, or do you nudge one way or the other?
It's been a little bit of both. Sometimes she sends me things and I'm like, wow, that's fantastic. No changes. And sometimes she sends me things and it's like, I don't know about this. What do you think? And so I'll offer suggestions or say, maybe we can change this color here, or maybe we can take this part out. She's open to feedback, which has been great. Because a lot of times in author-illustrator collaborations, the author sends in the text and then doesn't see it again until it's fully illustrated. And so I've been really lucky that Jess and I have a lot of give and take. She gets to give feedback on the text of the book, and I will be able to give feedback on the art. And so the end product is a result of both of our feedback and being able to collaborate together.
Now, Baby Believer is available in bookstores. You can find it at Amazon. You can go directly to babybeliever.com. I am curious how you have seen sales. Have they incrementally increased with every book, or are people not just buying the gift set for baby showers?
Yeah, they have incrementally increased with every book. And I think one of the wonderful things about writing Christian children's books is that this is an audience that's constantly birthing new audience members. Christians are having babies and giving these books to people who are having babies. And so it's been really exciting to see the sales continue to grow over the years.
You were first mover, right? You're the first one who had this idea. And so
Yes.
Have any replicas or any imitators tried to flood into the market behind you, which would be the American way, but authors don't like it?
Yeah, there are definitely some other authors that are doing similar work. Nothing that's like out and out copied mine. I haven't seen another counting primer, for instance, on biblical concepts, but things that are probably adjacent. But you know what? I think it's great. The gospel is the gospel is the gospel, and however it comes to families and children, that's fabulous. I hope the Lord does his goodwill through those books and mine.
Danielle Hitchen, congratulations on Hallelujah. That's the brand new offering for Easter. Put it in the Easter basket, and your 3 and under will just absolutely love it. And get them all. Give them away for presents. It's a fabulous present. Now back to work, Danielle. You got to book the show.
Thank you.
She's been the booker of the Hugh Hewitt show for I don't know how long. How many years, Danielle?
I think we're up to 17, but I'm losing count.
Yeah. She actually has the best Rolodex inside the Beltway. Thank you, Danielle. Quite a show today. All sorts of guests. I want to make sure I get in the State of the States update, courtesy of our sponsor, American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC. You ought to be in ALEC if you're a state legislator, alec.org/Hugh if you want the newsletter on everything going on. And every week they send me the update on what's going on in the states. And that's because they are the laboratories of democracy. They are the place where innovation happens. And this week they are focused on regulatory reform, because there were big wins in Kentucky, Utah, and in Kansas. In Kentucky, there's a bill that prevents agencies from implementing a rule with an economic cost of more than $500,000 over the first 2-year period without legislative approval. That was passed over the veto of the Democratic governor, of course, loves the regulatory state. Utah's House Bill 474 requires any administrative rule with an estimated impact of $2 million over the first 5 years receive legislative approval like that as well. That bill was signed by Governor Cox because he's a good Republican governor. And in Kansas, House Bill 2291 creates a sandbox program to ease burdensome regulations passed by both chambers. It's been presented to Governor. The sandbox program temporarily waives certain regulations to allow businesses to offer new products or services that would otherwise be restricted, with guidelines to ensure public health and safety. Missouri passed a similar bill last week. That is regulatory reform, and we love that it's going on in the states. ALEC.org/Hugh. Let me also remind you, if you're missing Dennis Prager, you can always join Pragertopia and get a little bit of Dennis like this.
I asked Charles Krauthammer, what is the biggest difference between Canada and the United States? You will love his response. The motto of Canada is peace, order, and good government. The motto of the United States is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
That is a fabulous bit of Dennis, and you can get more Dennis every day until he returns. We hope in June at Pragertopia. Join it, get your daily dose of Dennis.